Ձեզ այսօր իմ հյուրն է Կանադայի ներկայացուցիչների պալատի անդամ Stéphane Bergeron-ը. Good day, Mr. Bergeron. Thanks for accepting the interview request. So, the Quebec bloc and you personally, as its foreign affairs critic, have always been vocal on issues regarding Armenia. You have repeatedly raised the issues of Azerbaijani aggressions against Armenia prisoners of war held in Azerbaijan in international fora, namely the Council of Europe. It has always been greatly appreciated in Armenia. Can you please elaborate on the overall activities conducted in this direction?
As you indicated, I had the opportunity for a few times to raise the question at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, which I'm a delegate from the Canadian Parliament. I'm supposed to go back in April, and hopefully I'll have another opportunity to speak up about what's going on right now, especially in the Lachin corridor. We asked for a special committee to be held, an extraordinary committee to be held to look into this issue within the Foreign Affairs and International Development Committee, Canadian Foreign Affairs Committee, and we obtained these special hearings about the situation in the Lachin corridor, and we ended up with a resolution asking Azerbaijan to reopen this corridor, which is vital for Nagorno-Karabakh, and it would be consequent to the agreement that have been came to between Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia in 2020, if I remember. So Azerbaijan has the obligation to ensure that this corridor is always open. So for more than 100 days today, it has been closed with very difficult consequences for the population of Nagorno-Karabakh, which is totally unacceptable.
And just as mentioned, for more than 100 days, Azerbaijan has illegally closed the Lachin corridor, as a result of which a humanitarian crisis has been created in Nagorno-Karabakh. How do you assess the actions of the Azerbaijani side?
As I said, they have an obligation under the ceasefire agreement that have been concluded between Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia, to keep this corridor open. So pretending that this is a manifestation, a protest from environmental protesters, they are tolerating these so-called protests for more than 100 days in a country that usually doesn't really tolerate any protests, public protests, not very open to democratic expression in the streets. So why suddenly this country is accepting, tolerating those protests in the Lachin corridor? The only way to view it is that the authorities, the Azeri authorities, are behind those so-called protests in the Lachin corridor. And another proof of that is that when you hear the declaration of the officials of Azerbaijan or their representatives abroad, it is quite clear that this is an official position of the Azerbaijani government, which is totally unacceptable.
And you mentioned that in February, on your initiative, the Standing Committee of Foreign Affairs and International Development of the House of Commons of Canada adopted a motion calling on Azerbaijan to reopen the Lachin corridor. What are the reactions in Canadian political and public circles regarding Azerbaijan's actions?
In fact, in the first days of the blockade, the Canadian government issued a declaration calling Azerbaijan to reopen the corridor. The position of the Foreign Affairs Committee is only consequent to this executive decision of the Canadian government to call upon the Azerbaijan to reopen the Lachin corridor. So I think it was a position that was unanimous from all political parties, and that represents the point of view of the Canadians about what's going on right now. We can't accept that humanitarian crisis is totally fabricated and created by a state, and it's totally unacceptable. So we had to speak out. So this is what we decided to do, and this is what we will continue to do.
And Mr. Bergeron, however, how do you assess the position of the Canadian government in the current situation? What will be the response of the government of Canada to the adopted motion?
The Canadian government is usually supposed to answer to respond to a motion in committee. And we asked specifically the Canadian government to respond to our report. It hasn't been done so far. We're waiting for the response from the Canadian government. But I can just imagine that this response would be in accordance to what we put forward, because we did put forward the same kind of wording that the Canadian government itself issued a few days after the blockade began. So I think we're on the same page on that, and we shouldn't be surprised by the response from the Canadian government. That being said, one of the answers we got from the Canadian government when the war occurred a few months ago between Azerbaijan and Armenia was that we're not in a position. This was the answers from the Canadian government, the Canadian officials. We're not in a position to assess whether this conflict has been started by Armenia or Azerbaijan, because we don't have anybody on site to tell us what's going on. And we decided to correct that because, as you know, Canada has opened a consulate since, and is planning to open a formal embassy in the next few weeks, next few months. Hopefully, it will happen sooner than later, and then we'll have on the site officials that will be able to assess what's going on in the region, which is not the case right now. So hopefully, it will improve the Canadian presence in the region and the Canadian interventions there. The other thing I might add is that the Foreign Affairs Committee has planned to go to Yerevan and to Baku in order to discuss the overall question of the conflict between the two countries, but also to discuss especially the problem of the blockade of the Lachin corridor, knowing that we spent a few hours discussing this matter, and it still hasn't been resolved so far. So we would like to go on the ground to see what's going on and to hear from the people there what's going on, and to came back with findings that we'll share with Canadian Parliament.
And Mr. Bergeron, in fact, Azerbaijan also ignores the decision of the UN International Court of Justice. Do you think the statements made by various international actors will put enough pressure on Azerbaijan to open the corridor? What more can be done to solve this issue?
I think we have to keep to keep being vocal because apparently nothing has made the Azerbaijani government to move so far. So we have to keep going on. We have to keep insisting on Azerbaijan to reopen the Lachin corridor. It has been closed for too long yet, and we can't tolerate it to be still closed today and in the days to come. So we have to still be vocal in order to keep the pressure on the Azerbaijani government.
And we're witnessing recently big dynamics in Armenian-Canadian bilateral relations, activation of political contacts. The Canadian government announced that it will open, as you mentioned, the embassy in Yerevan this year, a step that you've been actively advocating. In this context, what opportunities do you see for the development of bilateral cooperation, and which areas are the most promising?
I would say this is an important signal from Canada that it opens its embassy in the Caucasus region in Yerevan. We know I've been told a lot of times that Armenians sometimes feel alone in the region as the sole democratic country in the region, and the findings of the Honorable Stéphane Bergeron in his report was that we have to support the democratic institutions in Armenia and to support the development of those democratic institutions in Armenia. You are fighting a hard fight in the region to have those democratic institutions. We have to recognize that. We have to support that. And I think one of the ways we found to express this support is to open this embassy in Armenia. It's a signal, as I said, from the Canadian government that it is important for us to be there to support our Armenian friends, to support their democratic efforts, their efforts to build democratic institutions that would be solid and sustainable. So this is an important signal, and I think the fact that we plan to go in the region is another signal that we pay attention to what's going on there, and that you're not forgotten.
Thanks for the interview, Mr. Bergeron.
Thank you very much.
Այսօր իմ հյուրն էր Կանադայի ներկայացուցիչների պալատի անդամ Ստեֆան Բերժերոնը։ Հաջողություն։